If you get a chance at some point in your life, take the opportunity to spend some time living in a major metropolitan city like New York or Chicago. You'll experience a way of life that offers unique experiences that can't quite be matched by surrounding cities. These same unique experiences are also what attracted people to cities when they were first built, and it led to their rapid growth. We call the rapid growth of cities urbanization. People were attracted to cities first and foremost because of jobs. Industry had always been big in the northern half of the US, and so people flocked to where they could make a consistent wage. The second reason why people moved to cities is because of the excitement that they offered. There was always something to do in big cities like go shopping, taking a sporting event, or go to places like museums, concerts, and the zoo. As cities grew, they also gave rise to our modern day public transportation system because people needed ways to travel around to different parts of the city. Just take a look at what Chicago's elevated train system became to cart people to different areas of the city. Public transportation also gave rise to the suburbs because even if a person didn't want to live in the city, bridges and trains could still give people access to a little bit of city life. I myself love Chicago and love living there, but for as much as I love it, not all of it's awesome. There are some sections of the city where job levels are low or where crime is high. These are still the same problems that people faced when large cities were first being developed. Buildings were often built very close together, and if one building caught fire, that could spell disaster for surrounding buildings. In fact, this is exactly what happened in the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. Also, with populations growing so quickly, crime increased, slum streets became littered with garbage because there was also no street sanitation, and disease spread quickly like cholera because people spent so much time in unsanitary conditions and so close to one another. And a fun fact about a lack of sanitation services is that women used to carry small umbrellas with them while walking called parasols, not only to shield themselves from the sun, but to prevent having garbage hit them as people just chucked it out of the window and onto the streets below. Typical living quarters in a city included staying in a building called a tenement, where there was little space and often large extended families lived together. Eventually, we'll see that as time progressed, reform movements began to take hold in large cities, and things like streetlights were set up to prevent crime, as well as the formation of sanitation, fire, and police departments to help clean up the streets and keep them safe. Hospitals and clinics were also set up by reform groups to help combat the spread of disease as well. The prospect of a job and excitement wasn't just a bonus for Southern Americans or citizens from more rural cities. It was also seen as the land of opportunity from more and more immigrants. The US saw a huge influx of immigration towards the start of the 20th century. Most of the incoming immigrants came from the Western European countries and settled on the East Coast, so around New York. To a lesser extent, some Asian immigrants also came to the US but settled on the West Coast in California. Reasons for immigration were varied, but many came either for jobs just like everyone else or sometimes to escape religious persecution or governmental unrest. One of the best things about living in a big city also includes the amount of diversity and culture you'll see when you walk around. In many big cities, there are often pockets of the city dedicated to particular ethnic groups. In Chicago, for example, there are Polish, Greek, Chinese, and Mexican neighborhoods. Oftentimes, when immigrants first come to the US, they will settle in certain parts of the city to be around people with the same ethnic background as they are. They did this so that they could still feel a connection to their heritage, but it also gave them some time to practice learning a new language and culture with people who were in the same situation as they were. The cities in this country were built on the back of immigrants and were made possible by all their hard work. However, for all their hard work, they were often taken advantage of as they were paid the lowest wages, given the worst jobs, and also the most dangerous ones as well. And even in lieu of all the crummy conditions immigrants accepted, there were still people who resented the influx of immigrants. So-called nativists felt that immigrants took jobs away from Americans and came here to create nothing but trouble. In fact, it got so bad the government passed the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 to limit immigration based on race. Definitely not one of the finer moments in American history, as some nativists didn't take the time to realize that they too at one point were immigrants themselves. The process of urbanization during the late 19th and early 20th century is really what began transforming our country into what it is today. It offered a place to earn a consistent wage as well as leisurely excitement that was lacking in more other rural areas. However, for all the promise that cities held, they were crowded and dirty, which led to things like crime, fire, and disease. These negatives, though, didn't dissuade people from moving there, and in fact, cities became the homes of many immigrants as well. Even though many immigrants worked hard and tried hard to assimilate to American culture, many nativists despised their presence.